Hey folks, today we're talking about Tinto Talks 38. This is going to be on the societal value system that is coming in EU5. We've seen a little bit about this system during all the Tinto Talks, but we've never had a full overview, and that is what Johan's going to be giving us today, and we're just going to get straight into it. So societal values describe the attributes of a country. Different countries start with different societal values, creating a unique and different experience. And Johan once again calling out, don't worry about the balancing and the numbers. That's all going to be tested and changed in the future. This is just how it's going to look in game, like the functioning of this system. And I think if this system does work well, it's going to bring some fantastic different ways to play the game. If you're one of these players that plays EU4 as the same country all the time, I think using this system, you can kind of roleplay that country with these different societal values, as we'll see during the Dev Diary, and play a country in a totally different way than you would maybe historically see it as. And that really does look like something you could do with this system. So the societal values, these range from -100 to +100, as we've seen a lot of these systems work in the game, where a -100 value is completely to the left and +100 to the right of the value. Basically just a swinging measure of which one you are kind of more aligned with. This change slowly happens over time, primarily influenced by estate privileges, government reforms, or laws that the country has. However, if you feel you can't wait for your society to change, you can always have a member of the cabinet focusing on attempting to nudge a societal value to something else in your country. So this isn't something you just choose. You don't go, I want to be inward looking or outward looking. I want to be Navy focused or Army focused. It's more of like an organic system that works in the background, and you will move towards them depending on your choices. Or as Johan says here, you can kind of nudge it that way if you really want to change it, but it's not something you just click and say, I want to be this, this, this. It's more your country becomes what you do in the game, rather than just choosing something and going with that. And you can see our first screenshot here, linked to what he was just saying, having that cabinet position, moving you towards something different. And you can see the different efficiency of this happening. If you want to move to one of these other societal values, these are the modifiers. And Johan pointing out here, obviously, if you have a character that's a good diplomatic skill, it's going to help you speed this along that little bit faster. All in all, however, there are 13 common societal values that all countries have at the start of the game. Currently, there is one unique for countries in and around China, which they're going to talk about in a future Dev Diary. That's probably around the flavor that Johan said he'd be talking about in like February, March time, I would think. They also have another one added in the Age of Absolutism as well. Some of these societal values you may recognize the name of or the design intent from previous games like EU2 and EU3, but they almost all have different impacts versus those games. And for the rest of the Dev Diary, Johan's going to go through all the different societal values, both sides of what they do. So the first one is centralization versus decentralization, and then a rough overview of them. So that's going to be what we're covering for the rest of this video. So a centralized country will be more efficient, while a decentralized country is more resilient. I think that makes sense. If you have everything in one place, if that one place goes away, everything will fall apart. If you're decentralized, you've got more of your kind of like power spread within your nation. And you can see here in this screenshot the effects that this has on your realm. And then the next one is traditionalist versus innovative. A traditionalist country prioritizes stability and tradition over all of the values, while an innovative country wants a more literate population and a faster adoption of new institutions. Now, for each one of these, he's also done another little breakdown between the traditionalist and innovative, and you'll see the same thing going down. I'm not going to read them all out. I'll leave a link, as always, in the description down below. So if you want a little bit more detail on each one of these, you can either read along on the screen now, or you can go off and read the Dev Diary at your own pace, but there's no point kind of like reading them both out. They're really kind of summarized by that top line for each one. The next one is spiritualist versus humanist. A spiritualist country is much more organized around the clergy, while a humanist country is much more tolerant towards heretics and heathen religions. The next one is aristocracy versus plutocracy. An aristocratic country is about having the leadership from those with noble blood, whilst a plutocratic country takes their leadership from the richest and the most powerful. Serfdom versus free subjects. We've got a screenshot for this one. A country with high serfdom is about exploiting the peasants as much as possible, whereas a country with free subjects treats peasants as human beings, you know, as they probably should. And you can see here the effects of serfdom on your nation. The next one is belligerent versus conciliatory. A belligerent country is a country that does not worry about the opinion of other countries. A conciliatory country appeases others either due to being weaker or it just believes that it's easier to catch flies with honey, so they probably play the diplomatic game rather than going to war that often. The next one is quality versus quantity. An army that focuses on quality is focused on making each soldier perform better, while an army focused on quantity tries to get more people to fight in their battles. The next is offensive versus defensive. A country that is focused on offensive prefers the attack, using their armies and navies in enemy locations, while a defensive country relies more on their forts to defeat the enemy. So you can already see through a bunch of these, you could play a very defensive nation have these societal values that really strengthen your core nation and really just kind of fend people off either diplomatically or just be so strong that somebody's not going to come in and attack you. Or you could have an offensive nation and really always be going to war, be belligerent, have these offensive values for your armies, helping you do those wars that little bit easier, but then maybe you're a little bit more susceptible to somebody attacking you and trying to take your land off you. Speaking of land, the next one is land versus naval. A country focused on land usually is a country without much of a coastline, while a navy-focused one may be those who values its coastline more than others. There's some big examples of these. I guess for like England, it's a mixture of the two. Fantastic navy, but also its army was pretty good as well. So there are going to be some, I guess, that kind of straddle the line in the middle, whereas most will probably be one or the other, or really focus on those. You're not going to have a naval Switzerland, at least not at the beginning, and you're not going to have like a land Crete or something, I don't know, one of these places that's just surrounded by water. I don't know, like a land Australia. Probably isn't going to make as much sense, but we'll see during campaigns which one kind of makes sense. And obviously you might switch between one and the other, depending on if you take more land. You might want to switch to land from naval, or if you do suddenly get a bunch of coastline, maybe you will switch to naval from being land at the start. The next one is more economic, that is capital economy versus traditional economy. A country with a capital economy is more focused on earning money, particularly from trade, towns and cities, while one with a traditional economy is more orientated around people living off what the land provides. The next one is individualism versus communalism. A country based on individuality may have more acceptable characters, but one focused on communalism is all about the greater good of society. And you can see, as I've said, if you read through the next two lines, it gives you a little bit more information about how that can help you in different areas of the game. The next one is mercantilism versus free trade. A mercantilist country aims to protect the market price of their produced goods in their country, while a country focused on free trade wants to benefit from more trades around the world. And this is another one that we've been given a screenshot here. This is what mercantilism will do to your realm at the moment. Again, all these figures are going to be changed in the future. And I guess this will change how powerful it is depending on where on that scale it is. I imagine if you're 10% into this, it'll be weaker. But if you are, say, 100 mercantilism, it's going to be a lot stronger, I would presume anyway. The next one is outward versus inward. An outward country focuses more on interacting with other countries, whilst an inward country looks inside its borders. Pretty obvious there. And as I said earlier, you can kind of match these with other ones further up that would make you a very insular nation, but very like powerful within your realm, to really make it hard for somebody to get in there and take your land off you. And the next one is liberalism versus absolutism. A liberal country will emphasize the importance of civic liberties and legislative governing bodies, whilst an absolute country will focus more on a centralized authority of its rulers while reigning in the power of the different estates. And this is the one that Johan mentioned is going to come in the age of absolutism. And obviously, depending on which one you choose, that will shape your realm over the next 2 ages, as he does point out there. And with that, that is the end of the video this week. Interestingly, Johan says next week they're going to revisit a topic that has been revised. So this is one of the previous dev diaries. I guess they've made some major changes and they're going to come back and show us what those changes mean. Let me know in the comments down below which one you think that could be. I'm not too sure. There's been a few of them where they've made some pretty big changes, but it looks like we're getting a whole dev diary on one of them. So I imagine there must be some pretty major changes in there, and it'll be interesting to see what they've done. And again, this is another example of if you have feedback, do go onto the forums, do give feedback, be constructive, don't be rude, guys. Just go on there, give your feedback. And as we've seen in most of these dev diaries, they've listened to requests, they've made changes, or they've gone a little bit further explaining why they want it to work a certain way. And you might not always agree, but at the end of the day, Johan and the team there are making the game they want to make. I prefer usually when studios do that, they make the game they want. And if we like it or not, well, it was still the game they made. I think if you do go down the road of doing everything players want, you can actually devalue and miss what your game was supposed to be. So it is good to see they've kind of done that little bit here, a little bit there. They have made changes that made sense, and they have pushed back sometimes when they don't want something to work that way. But again, we'll see next week what this major change is by the sounds of it. But with that, we'll leave it there. Do make sure you've hit that like button if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new here. I'm covering all the news around EU5, and I cover Crusader Kings in a very similar manner, but we'll leave it there. And I'll see you in the next one.